Welcome to the Art of Being a Mum podcast, where I, Alison Newman, a singer, songwriter and Aussie mum of two, enjoys honest and inspiring conversations with artists and creators about the joys and issues they've encountered while trying to be a mum and continue to create. You'll hear themes like the mental juggle, changes in identity, how their work's been influenced by motherhood, mum guilt, cultural norms, and we also stray into territory such as the patriarchy, feminism, and capitalism. You can find links to my guests and topics we discuss in the show notes, along with a link to the music played, how to get in touch, and a link to join our supportive and lively community on Instagram. I'll always put a trigger warning if we discuss sensitive topics on the podcast, but if at any time you're concerned about your mental health, I urge you to talk to those around you, reach out to health professionals, or seek out resources online. I've compiled a list of international resources which can be accessed on the podcast landing page, alisonnewman.net/podcast. The Art of Being a Mum would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and water which this podcast is recorded on, as being the Boandik people in the Barron region. I'm working on land that was never ceded. Hello and welcome to the podcast. It is such a pleasure to welcome you back to Season 4 after a short little break. And as always on Mother's Day, I like to do a little bit of a special episode, usually with more than one guest. So today I'm very excited to welcome Sotiropoulos and Jessie Ann Elliot. Mary grew up in Sydney and moved to Goulburn almost 5 years ago. She's a mum of a 3-year-old daughter. She went from being a full-time teacher to a writer, community builder and unschooling guide. Jessie has been a Hunter Valley local for most of her life, except for a tiny quarter-life crisis year in Scotland at the age of 23. She's a mum of 2 children, a boy and a girl. Jessie went from a full-time community planner in local government to a writer, creator, photographer, holistic counsellor, meditation therapist and women's circle facilitator. And they have collaborated to write the book, The Mum Who Found Her Sparkle. Jessie and Mary started out as online friends, meeting in a membership facilitated by motherhood studies sociologist Dr. Sophie Brock, who's also a previous guest of this podcast. In this group, they learned not only about matrescence, but how motherhood is socially constructed and how far removed the act of housework is from actual mothering. The journeys to becoming mothers saw both women completely reevaluate how they viewed the world. There is no mistaking that our culture glorifies being able to do it all, and that this significantly impacts on the well-being and mental health of mothers and therefore families. The joy is often lost, and things that a woman enjoyed pre-motherhood are often put on the back burner as she places others' needs above her own. In June 2022, Jessie had the idea to write a children's book aimed at mothers that would explore the topic of this lost sparkle that a mother can experience when she puts her needs last. The pair went on to create it in the early hours of the morning, late at night, in pockets of time between getting snacks for children or changing nappies. The story follows T and Oscar as they support their mum Amber to find her sparkle. It is a story of a mum being just as worthy of her shininess as her kids are, and everyone knowing about it. Within the story there are layers of meaning, and they have intentionally designed many opportunities to spark purposeful conversation throughout its pages. Their hope is that this book inspires not just kids, but parents to prioritise finding that lost sparkle. And the book will be available in the coming months. Please be aware this episode contains discussions around postnatal depression and anxiety and birth trauma. I really hope you enjoy today's episode. It was a lot of fun to record. Joining me on this very special Mother's Day episode, I have not one but 2 creative mothers. I'd love to welcome Jessie and Mary to the podcast. Thank you for coming on, ladies.
Hi, Alison. Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love it. I love it. I've only ever had one other episode where I had multiple guests at once. So this is lovely. It's a treat for me to have more than one face in the Zoom chat. It's lovely.
Yeah.
So tell me briefly before we launch into things, whereabouts are you both at the moment? You're Victoria, am I right? Or no, you tell me. I don't know where I'm going.
That's all right. Close.
Yeah.
So I am in Hunter Valley, so just
Ah.
outside of Maitland, which is sort of near Newcastle.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're in New South Wales. Been a Hunter local for most of my life, except for a quarter life crisis when I moved to Scotland for a year. But other
Oh,
than that, I've
yeah.
been a Hunter local. So yeah,
Yeah.
just live around there.
So you both you know each other in real life apart from on the Instagram
Well,
world, or?
we
I was a Sydney girl, grew up as a Sydney girl, but I live about an hour and a half, 2 hours out of the main centre of Sydney,
Mm-hmm.
and about an hour from Canberra, in regional New South Wales. So we met in an online membership with Dr. Sophie Brock back in 2020, was it, Jessie?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It was 2020, and then once Jessie had her second in 2021, we sort of connected even more at that point because I was fascinated by how she was navigating her second postpartum, her fourth trimester. Yeah, and apologies, we did say this. My beautiful daughter is very much wanting to make an appearance today.
wonderful.
So I'll let Jessie take over for a sec.
Oh dear. All good. So yes, when you said Dr. Sophie Brock, I got excited because I've had Sophie on the podcast and she's amazing. I love what she's teaching. She's, for those who don't know, Sophie's a motherhood studies sociologist based in Australia, in Sydney, I think she is. And she runs lots of things online, education, and even just if you just get on her Instagram, it's incredibly inspiring. And yes, so that's awesome. But yes, go on. Sorry.
Absolutely.
Oh
no, it's very, any chance to pump her up, we're totally in support of.
Yeah, me too.
It was just, it was a beautiful meet. So, yeah, we met in her online membership, Liberated. And as Mary said, we just sort of started chatting more and more. And after a period of time, doing that, Mary went on a road trip and actually came and had dinner at our house. And when we met in person, it was very easy. It was just kind of like, of course, we've always known each other in person. It was just, a really sort of easy.
I think that was a year ago, if I'm honest. It was maybe end of May, of last year that I met you in person. Yeah. And then, well, the rest is history, really. Following those little breadcrumbs, isn't it?
You lovely ladies have got a book in the works, which is pretty awesome. And it's called The Mum Who Found Her Sparkle. So who would like to tell us, maybe start off by sharing how you came up with it or what compelled you to create the children's book?
Yeah. Well, I guess going right back to when I became a mum, I planned a lot for the birth. I knew roughly how to change a nappy. I knew possibly I might need to swaddle the newborn, but I really hadn't prepared myself for that transition to mother, for matrescence properly. And I experienced postnatal depression and anxiety for probably the first, 8-9 months, sort of severely after my son was born.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time, I really found that I very much dismissed my feelings and my emotions, and I was just doing a hell of a lot of disassociating. And it wasn't until I started to, again, sort of focus on my creativity, so my self-expression, that I started to claw my way out of that. So that had been sort of brewing since 2020, I guess, how important it is for us to focus on what brings us joy. And so I guess coming from that, slowly building that more into my life, and then leading into when I fell pregnant with my daughter, my second pregnancy, and approaching the end of it. And I thought, okay, I know much more now about accepting all the help that I can. I know that I need to engage the support of a postpartum doula. I know I need to just let the house go in terms of the task.
Yeah.
But I thought, what am I doing to plan for my creativity in this time in my life? Because I knew that I needed that to stay really mentally well, and to really assist in that transition. So I came up with a creative project. So I had called it 90 Emotional Days. And so each day during my 4th trimester, I was going to take, a moment or several moments to check in with myself and how I was feeling, and really sort of, so it was to help myself as well name what I was feeling, because as growing up a good girl, like we all do, we kind of don't really learn how to really properly honor what we're feeling, or even know what that might even be some of the time. And that creative element as well was either taking, a photo or making a video, and just sharing that each and every day, however it sort of felt good. And it sort of evolved into, making funny reels, doing breastfeeding inspired digital art, taking breastfeeding photos in front of wall art out in the community. And then right at the end of that, my daughter, I think she was 4 months old, and this idea came to me. And originally I messaged Mary straight away. Originally, it was the mum who lost her expression. Yeah. So that was where the idea originally come from. And then it just blossomed and blossomed. So, and evolved and changed as both of us went on the journey of this book together. And I think for both of us, we had struggles, didn't we, Mary? Just sort of talking about at the start of both of our postpartum journeys and what that transition was actually like.
Yeah. I think I'm a little different to Jessie in that I'm not as organised as her at getting things in place of like, no, as in I think I was watching on when she was doing the 90 Emotional Days and thinking, how is she doing this with a newborn? I mean, it just was so foreign to me, because my experience was, I mean, I would have definitely been diagnosed with postnatal anxiety. I never actually went to the doctor. We hit COVID lockdown 2 weeks after I had my daughter. And it was smack bang the time she woke up, and she was an extremely vocal, unsettled little bubba. And that's kind of just, she's 3 now, and that's just kind of been our theme for 3 years, which is fine. But I think I just started to see that I needed to pull from different little things that brought me joy, essentially. And I kind of started to grab onto these little things that would bring me joy, because I knew that my mental health was better for it. So Jessie was like one of those people. So when she jumped into my DMs, I'm thinking, she's onto something here. And I think you had originally approached me, because I did say to her, you do not need me for this, Jessie. You can run with this idea. I'm happy to help assist you through the process. Like, because I'm a primary school teacher, I've read lots of picture books to so many different kids. I love them. I think they're a beautiful way to access information and create like depth of meaning. I think they're a really underutilized resource. So and I did a few read alouds just on my Instagram where I was reading with my daughter, like some picture books that I liked. And then so she sort of jumped into my DMs. I said, yes, this is great. Loving this idea. I can absolutely see where you're going with it. But you don't actually, I don't think you need me.
But we did.
She convinced me that it was
joint project.
Sort of joint project, and
Yeah.
I'm incredibly grateful for that because, I mean, even from last year, the message has definitely evolved.
Yeah.
Just sort of organically as we've been going through the process, right? Like not
Yeah.
forced, it's just sort of, it's kind of gained legs and momentum.
Yeah.
Because I think, I mean, this is what this podcast is all about too. Mums are super creative. And I mean, when I would think of what creativity was, or an artist was, or somebody that was creative, I'd think someone that could draw or paint really well.
Yeah.
And I'm not those things. I could not draw. I need a YouTube video with step-by-step instructions on how to draw anything. I'm a stick person, didn't progress past year 2 drawer. Okay? So it was also getting my head around the fact that creativity, and particularly in motherhood, can look like a whole bunch of different things. There's not one little narrow box that it fits into. And so obviously the picture book made sense for us both.
Yeah.
I love
Absolutely.
that. My background's in early childhood education, so I can relate to. I love the idea of it's so simple. You just think it's a simple book, but it can express and convey so much and so many. You can choose what layer of meaning you take from it. Depending on who's reading it. Right. And I love that it's a children's book, but someone has to read it to the children. So that person is going to get so much out of it. Was that really deliberate that you wanted to make it like that? That was right from the start. That's how you're planning it.
Absolutely. It's sort of, yes, it's a picture book. And I guess, yes, you could read it and think, here's a bit of glitter and we're going on an adventure with this glitter. But for those that want to use it as a tool to have those conversations around, mum's mental health, and even around challenging with the caregiving role, we were really strong on having dad be really involved in care work in the book, and also having extended family around. So it was a way to have that conversation around the importance of, mental health, as in, reacting to that as urgently as we may have if someone broke a leg, just really elevating that conversation, but also challenging really early some of those stereotypes that we have around care work and, the presence of a village. So yes, you could read it at any layer. But it was definitely so intentional for us to really just weave some really deep meaning throughout. And that is where Mary's experience, expertise came in to be able to, with her experience of reading so many books, just, be able to make sure that we were adding so many layers. And we were talking the other day, Mary, and you were saying, I even picture this in, the self-help for mums, like section of like bookshop, because we want for the parent to be sitting there reading it, to be getting something from it, and, in some ways feeling, really important and validated that they are important.
Actually, I'm going to refer back to a quote that I found on your Instagram, Jessie. If you don't mind, I'll quote you.
Oh, of course. What is it?
Everyone does. Whenever I say this, people freak out. So it's not bad. It's really, really good. You said, "I did not like who I was when I became a mum. I dismissed and invalidated my own needs. I judged myself on expectations placed on me by a society that glorifies supermums and the myth of the perfect mother." And when I read that, I just went, boom, like that. I honestly, I related to that very much, and I'm sure there are a lot of other people out there that relate to that. And that's that thing. It's that expectations and, like you said, the cultural norms that are set up that we're not supported. We're not, and it frustrates me so much. I have this conversation with just about everyone I have on here. Like we basically keep life going. If it wasn't for us, if we just said, nah, sorry, end of everything, we're not gonna keep doing this, there would be no more human race.
No.
So why, like, we're revered in so many senses, but then when it comes to we're just a mum, you know, it's like you lose your identity, you lose your sense of self, you're like, you know, and that is brought on by the way society sees us. It makes me really, really cross. So yes, I love that quote. Not because you went through it though. Like, I'm not saying I loved it because you know what I mean?
Because we can see our experience in it. And that's something, you know, Mary and I feel so strongly about, in that, yes, the level of intensity right now can be intense, but it's very important for us to challenge this so that our children experience it less, and then their children less. We, like, I won't swear.
No, you can swear. You can swear. Go for it.
But, you know, I'm just like, there's no fucking way my daughter will be going through this. My son will not be going, you know, it's just, you can see what needs to change. And yes, it's frustrating. And you can also go, well, what can I do in my everyday life to challenge that and change it? So it does get easier and continues to get easier. Yeah, Mary.
I can see.
I was going to bounce off of that, and I think that there's a huge puzzle piece of this book, The Mum Who Found Her Sparkle, for us. We are not, and I mean, I had this drop in as I was driving today, and I thought, I need to say this when I'm on the podcast later. But we are not downplaying the importance of maternal mental health. Like, we know the statistics, and I think that's the biggest thing too. Jessie and I are well aware of the statistics, not only because the numbers are there, but because we see it. We talk to mamas. We know, we hear the stories, and you would as well doing a podcast like this. There are themes across the board. What we're hoping to achieve with The Mum Who Found Her Sparkle, though, is, yes, there are sometimes bigger issues at play that need, you know, a lot more support. But if we can sort of start to access that sparkle every day and just do tiny little things, even in the micro moments that we have, because that's what we get as mums, right? We don't have an hour. We don't have an hour to get it all together. Sometimes it's that 35-second little window of time, or that 5-minute little window of time. And our thinking behind Sparkle is it's those small micro moments that you can essentially take back for yourself and spark that joy and that curiosity that we had before we became mums. I mean, we're human beings at the end of the day.
We're whole humans.
I mean, it's not, we're not just mums, like, as in, I want to be just a mum too, as in, I love being a mother, but
I'm a mum and.
I'm a mum and it can be all the things. Like, those things don't just disappear because suddenly I've got a baby that I'm breastfeeding 24/7. You know? Absolutely. Where we find our sparkle has been there from, well, I would argue, from when we were babies ourselves. And when we're actually allowed to tap into that, it's that feeling of incredible. The way I think of sparkle is, it's like that feeling of incredible peace you feel when you've discarded all the shoulds and you're just in your zone, whether it be with your kids there or without. Like, it doesn't matter. It can be at any point. But you know that feeling where it's like your soul and heart sort of align beautifully. And, you know, you take that big breath and you're like, okay, yes, this is life right here. Like, I can almost touch this. And it's trying to just encourage, trying to tap into that as much as possible, even in those small pockets of time. So that you get, and I think we changed the word to sparkle. We were sort of playing around with vocab and thinking about how to make this language accessible. Like, kids, you can imagine, oh, mum, have you lost your sparkle a bit today, you know? And mum's feeling a little off. Oh, what could we do to help you get it back? And, you know, it can be a conversation that happens in families, and, like, we just see it as just a really beautiful invitation to create discussion and spark discussion. And that's what this really is for us.
No, I think that's really important because I often hark back to the time when I was a child. I had very little understanding or knowledge about my parents' goings on. Like I knew they were my parents. I knew they went to
Yep.
work. I knew they did things, but I didn't know, I knew my dad liked sport. But like what was going on with them, they were very
Yep.
good at hiding things. I mean,
Yes.
I'm not saying they were like nasty people hiding things, but that
Mm.
was what you did in those days. You didn't share all
Mm.
things with your kids, and you were sort of protecting them in a way. I suppose that's how they saw it. But these days, like I feel like I share so much with my kids, and sometimes I even think, oh, should I really be burdening my kids with all this? But then I think, no, it's real life. At some point in their life, they're gonna, I don't know, have relationships where it's going to be good for them to share how they're feeling. And I think that's really great, this opportunity to actually say the words and check in with people and be like, I can see that you're not feeling like your normal self. As you said, use those words, you lost your sparkle. And how can we get it back? I think that's a wonderful thing. And just on a side note, like with my kids at work, I work in a kindy at the moment. And, teaching kids to actually feel their emotions and name their emotions.
Yeah.
Like you were saying earlier, Jessie, about, sometimes you don't even know the name of what you're experiencing.
No.
And then to say, recognizing it in others and say, what's some ways we can help them feel better or however they're feeling, changing that. And I think that's really important. And it's not something that's really been done forever. You know what I mean?
I totally agree. When I grew up, I don't really ever remember, having any kind of conversation around emotions and feelings. And I mean, I think in myself, like a lot of people, I grew up with a very busy mum, very, very busy mum. And she would work full time. My dad would work full time, but he would have, I could see, had access to a lot more recreation time than she did. She did everything. But yeah, still worked full time. It was task to task to task.
Yeah.
And that's what I saw growing up. So obviously that's what I internalized. But even just 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were in the car together and I said to her, "Did you do anything for you when we were little?" And she said, "No, there wasn't any time." And I knew that's what I witnessed, but I was sort of just wanting to ask from her perspective what her sort of memory of it was. And yeah, she didn't. And this is also from a woman. She still had her parents, like, they took care of us, helped with us, and my dad's parents were around. So she even had access to a much bigger village than I do, and she struggled.
Yeah.
So it's, it is, that things have changed in that we want we want them to see us as whole humans within reason, but as whole humans.
Yeah.
And we want to help them get to know themselves. I know when it comes to feelings and emotions, I have absolutely loved helping my son, because he's 4 now, tune into himself. And this is I never thought this would even be a parenting win moment, but about 6 months ago, or it might have been a little bit longer, he actually said to me, "Mummy, I'm feeling angry." And do you know how proud I was that he could name that and express that to me? I just thought, I've just won today. And, then we actually had the ability to do some things together that helped him, move that emotion. But yeah, it's a really new thing, really, in the scheme of sort of generational parenting and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it was a meme or something the other day, sort of along the lines of, now I know why my mum just wanted to sit in a bedroom alone in the darkness
Yeah.
by myself.
Yeah.
And I just laughed and thought, that is all I want. And I think that also goes back to this whole self-care that we're sold of like, go get the massage and your nails done. I'm like, I don't want to sit in a hairdresser. That doesn't bring me joy. Like, sure, it might for someone else, but that's not where I'm finding my sparkle. I'm like, let me lie down with a nice pillow on, preferably, maybe a bit of music. But darkness suits me just fine. Like, because that's how my nervous system feels calm, you know. So we're told, even Mother's Day is coming up, and I'm thinking to myself, just dropping hints to hubby, I'll be happy if he just takes her out for the day, entertains my beautiful toddler, and it takes gets rid of all that energy, and I just sit on the couch and do absolutely nothing. You know, I don't want a fancy lunch. I don't want to be taken out. And again, I think, the sparkle side of things, some mamas will find it doing those things, which is beautiful. I say power to you. But tapping into what actually, like, how can you access your own? What's going to make you feel better? It's not anybody else's story. And that's what we love. We get mums jumping in our DMs like, this is how I found my sparkle today. And they'll send us a little story or a video or a picture. And I said to Jessie, we just pulled this idea out of thin air. And now
said yes to this idea.
But it was just this little inkling of an idea, and we just pulled it out of thin air. And now we have people having conversations with us about it because it's important enough.
Yes.
Brilliant. You know,
there was something what you said, Mary, just made me giggle, because on an episode of Grace and Frankie, they were doing a flashback to Grace's Mother's Day, 30 years before or something, and she was away at a hotel for the weekend, and they were like, you were away for Mother's Day? And she said, yeah, well, it's Mother's Day, not Children's Day. I just remember giggling. But it's funny because, as we've said, what brings each person's sparkle could be very different, but that also could change, day to day, minute to minute as well. But something we loved doing, didn't we, Mary? Oh my goodness, Sparkletober was just the most fun we have ever had. In the month formerly called October, last year we renamed it to Sparkletober because we just wanted to, just to continue that conversation that we'd started having with, our friends and community that we were growing on Instagram. So we sort of just invited people to share images or videos of them just really just doing things that made them, brought them sparkle. And Mary did some fabulous dancing. It was wonderful.
I'm a dancer at heart. You cannot take the dancer out of me. Not choreographed, okay? I'd like to point this out. I'm a freelance dancer. I don't want to be told what to do. I just need space. Give me space on that dance floor, and that's where I'm going to be, basically.
It was so wonderful because we had just people sharing, things they were doing with their kids or just by themselves. And it was just it was so much fun just, to have these conversations with friends and family and just to see them so lit up about it. So, we'll definitely do that again. It was just wonderful.
Well, we'll get Alison involved.
Awesome.
We'll be in your DMs, Alison.
Oh, great. No,
right.
do that.
You're a VIP. You'll be a VIP of the next Sparkletober for sure.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'll be sure to share it with my community and get them involved too. I love that. And on that note, on Mother's Day, I'll be going to the races without my children.
That's good.
Because it is Mother's Day, not Children's Day.
That's
my mum used to joke when it was Mother's Day. I distinctly remember asking her once, well, when's Children's Day? Why don't we get a day? And she said to me, every day is Children's Day. It's like, now I understand. My poor mother.
At the time, you're like, huh? And now you're like, oh.
Yeah, I get it. But that was interesting what you said before, Jessie, because that my mother was very similar. She was always busy, always doing, and would do it herself. We didn't have quite, the village that like she moved from Melbourne, left her family over there, but we had neighbours, we had my dad's parents, but I just remember her always doing something, unless she was sitting down with a cup of tea, but same thing. I had, I can't remember how I asked her, but it was a similar thing. It was like, I knew Dad went out and played footy and he played cricket and that they were his interests, but Mum didn't have anything of her own. That was just
was she? Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, I just think I couldn't survive like that. There's no way I could survive.
And it's not that I very firmly want my children to know who I am. I want my grandchildren to know who I am. And not in a context of service. Like, whilst I am incredibly nurturing and caring and, you know, all that's a very high value for me, I feel very strongly that they also need to see me as the whole human that I am. And just being in their life is sort of just is one part. It's a very important part, but it's just one part of who I am. So.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to take that quote, that you're going to hear that in promotion of your episode, because it's in a nutshell. That's literally it. Like, I feel the same about my boys. Like, I'm very visual with what I leave the house to go sing and perform. They know I'm in my studio doing things. And it's like, this is me. Like you said, Mary, you don't, your passions and the things that you love and your abilities and your gifts, they don't just disappear just because you had a child. So yeah, I think it's very important.
Yeah. The saddest thing for me was how long it actually took me to acknowledge them, because all I wanted to ever be was a mum. And I thought, okay, I'm now a mum. Life goals achieved. Great.
Tick.
And that's now my role. I am secondary to my daughter. She's the most important thing, and that's what I focus on. And obviously that's just a recipe for disaster. Like, it's not going to work. It's not sustainable. And especially, I had a daughter who was, for 2 years of her life, she was awake constantly. She would wake up. I would think I had 5 minutes, and it just wasn't going to happen. Every creak of a floorboard she would hear. And the more I was pouring into the mothering side, the worse I was feeling. It's just inevitable, I guess, that happens if you are taking no time for yourself. But when we talk about things about what makes a good mum, that's what it was for me. Sacrificed every need, every want, everything for my kids. And now that I'm unraveling all this stuff and pulling back all the layers, I realize how incredibly damaging that is. And that's not something I want to pass to my daughter. Why would I want her to think her importance on a priority list is, you know, way down the bottom? That's not a lesson I want to teach. So then it became a focus to say, okay, well, no, I am taking that time. I am taking that 10 minutes. I am taking that half an hour, and I'm not going to feel incredibly guilty about it every single time I do it. You know, I'm allowed to have a shower in peace. Like, I'm allowed to do that. Like,
yes, you are.
It sounds so silly to me now, but I felt so guilty just to jump in the shower because I knew she would be crying. But I need a shower. I mean, it's a basic human need, and I'm depriving myself of that. It's just horrible when I think back, and just the conditioning around it all. My mum was the same as yours, you know, same thing. It was, she had very limited hobbies. I don't even really know what they were now. Now she's retired and kind of a bit lost of, like, what am I doing with myself? And I'm sort of encouraging her now at, you know, in her 60s, like, Mum, you know, I'm writing this book. It's all about, like, it could really benefit, you know, because I love her and I want her to see that side. And I think she does. I think she does, and she's slowly undoing stories of her own, essentially. But in her 60s, you know, I don't want to be in my 60s before.
No, before we start living.
That's right.
But that's a really good point too. It's like it's not just for mums who are actively mothering roles now. It's for anyone who's been a mum or is still a mum. You know what I mean? It's like that generation. It doesn't matter how old you are. That's such a good point.
It seems like you might get to a certain point and they sort of release. I know, like, my sister and I were in our probably early 20s, or late teens, early 20s, and it's just it was like all of a sudden, right, it's my time. And you know, she was, you know, hanging out with friends a lot more and going out and doing all of these things, and But then, reflecting on that obviously that hurts my heart that she
Had to
probably
wait
wanted
till
to be
now.
doing those
Yeah.
things, the whole time. And then for all of the reasons that we've talked about, she didn't. And, it's,
Yeah.
I didn't want that for her. And I've
Yes.
said
Yeah.
to her so many times, you deserved more than that.
Mm.
You deserved to be able to do what brought you joy.
Yeah.
And I don't really know how she feels about hearing that from, like a daughter.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, what do you know? But yeah, like it's we all deserve it.
Yeah, that is so true.
You're listening to The Art of Being a Mum with my mum, Alison Newman.
Mary, do you mind if I ask? You talked about sort of unraveling that or changing that story for yourself about just needing to be mum and putting yourself further down the list. And you talked about it changing, but was there a sort of a moment or something that triggered you to start to see that in yourself?
Oh, you know what? I've been asked this a few times, and kind of when I reflect, I realize it wasn't one big moment in time. It was that accumulation of, well, the fact that my nervous system was rattling constantly, and with every cry, with every scream, with every, it would just, I felt incredibly triggered. And so I have spoken about this in podcasts before, that I experienced like intense anger and rage. I'm sorry, Baba, come on, honey. And I didn't know where that rage was coming from. I mean, I'd always been like a passionate sort of person, fiery, I guess. It's like the Greek blood in me. You can't get rid of that. Like we have, there's a bit of oomph and passion when we do things, but
Yeah.
I had a temper, I would say, but not the level of rage that sort of was coming out of me. Like it was explosive.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, what is going on? I'd never experienced it that way before. And then obviously the guilt and the shame pops in, because you're like, I'm feeling this way towards the situation of being a mum. This is the one thing I wanted, and I'm not even appreciating it. It's that cycle. Right, that inner talk, that inner, that little person just sitting there talking to me in the back of my mind is horrible, would say horrible things, but it was me doing it to myself, which is the saddest part for me now. So I don't think it was one big moment. It was more just recognizing, like, where is this coming from? Why am I having these feelings? I need to pull in some support here, or I need to be looking at things differently. And then it's just a very slow, one day, 1 hour at a time process. I see Sophie Brock. Oh, she's starting a membership. This could be interesting. And that really was a big catalyst. Listening to podcasts, hear the word matrescence. Oh, what is that word? I've not heard of this before. And then, it was just that. It was just those small incremental moments that sort of were building and building until I just kind of went, no, this is not my reality now. I'm not accepting this as my motherhood experience, and no, I'm not doing it this way anymore. And then just clawing it back. And I say clawing because, like, it is a fight. You're fighting against not only yourself and that inner chatter, but like we talked about before, you're fighting against a society that is actively pushing against you. And like it feels incredibly hard. And I guess, again, this is why the picture book is just a beautiful culmination of this for me, because it is fun still. Like, yes, our book is for mums, but the kids are going to enjoy it as well. It's playful. And I think Jessie and I really exude that. Like, we enjoy that. Like, we have fun. When I met her in person, it was like I've known her my whole life. We were just mucking around, just talking, laughing. Like, it was easy and easeful. And, but it's that like the mum who found her sparkle couldn't have come in 2020. Like, it wasn't ready to be here in 2020. We were doing our own thing. Like, we were battling our own stuff. We were on that journey. We knew each other, but not as well then. But we were kind of like unraveling our stuff to eventually kind of join together in this book. But it was not something that could have come earlier. So it's, it's just, you just don't get told this before you can become a mum. Like how much you have to fight against things that feel sometimes very much like they're set up to just make you fail, you know? Like you just don't know this. And I mean, I don't know. I always think about how we could have done things differently, but when it's your first kid and it's what you're around and what you hear, I wasn't around Dr. Sophie Brock then. I didn't even know she existed. I didn't know people like Jessie existed. I didn't know this podcast would have been a thing. Like, you don't know any of this stuff until you're right in it. And I have conversations about this a lot. Like, how could we, you know, prevention over cure, essentially? Like, how could we get in earlier? And some people are adamant that, no, you just have to be in it to understand. But for me, the teacher side of me is like, no, we can be doing better for new mums because then they're not actively seeking out information at the most vulnerable time in their life. They're not scrapping together this web, this support network when they're just sleep deprived and at like a really low point in their life. Like we shouldn't have to be waiting for that.
Yeah.
But absolutely. I don't know then what the answer is. I guess Spark was our little way of doing that. Just like this podcast is your little way of doing it. It's all part of the bigger puzzle, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I tell myself. Like, because you feel like you want to get out there and shake the chains, like just do something and change everything. And that's not going to happen. So it's like little bits all joined together to make hopefully the big change. That's
right. We can only make change at the table we're at.
That's I like that. That's a nice one.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I can't take credit. Amy,
Alison.
Abby Wambach. Is it Abby Wambach? Lennon Doyle's partner said she did a beautiful big post. It might have been 6-8 months ago, and it was just essentially about making change at the table that you're at. So,
you have to remember that one. That's really good.
It was an incredibly powerful article, and it's stuck in my mind because you want to shake the chains, but it's but that can feel so overwhelming. So how can I, you know, take a step back from that, and what can I do? What can I do to make those changes, make those incremental changes?
Yeah.
I think that's the journey all mums go on, isn't it? We kind of like get to that point of, yes, we know there needs to be that big structural change. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it, right? No. But then you go, but I am one person who is at this intense period of my life, like Jessie was talking about before, and I don't have the capacity to pull down everything and start it from scratch. Like I can't do that. But maybe if I choose to go out with my feet on the grass instead of doing those dishes today, I'm taking a little bit back. You know, maybe if when hubby gets home, I feel confident enough to say, hey, I just need half an hour in the room. I'll be back out and ready to go. I just need that time to regroup after a whole day. Perfect. You take it back a little bit, you know, it's like taking those little pieces back. And that's what I said before. It's clawing it back. It feels like that's what you have to do. And again, I don't agree with this is how it is, but it's the reality of it. So just take those little pockets of time for yourself, you know, like, because you do matter. We talk, but we are human beings. I mean, I used to teach this to my kids. You're a human being. You're a beautiful person. We respect each other in this room because we are all human beings, and that's why. There's no other reason but that, because we're human beings, all living on this earth, and we can respect each other. And I used to teach it, and then I become a mum, and I show myself zero respect, zero self-compassion, zero care. Like it doesn't work. Again, it's not a sustainable model. It's
Absolutely.
Socials are an interesting thing, isn't it? Because it's like I was not using it to my advantage prior to becoming a mum. I was just consuming the content. Oh yeah, you know. And obviously, what do you see of mums? These perfectly color coordinated photos, everything put together, no mess, you know, all of that. And then when I started using social media differently, you meet a Jessie, you go, oh, hang on a sec. You start building this web and you realize, okay, if mothers can use it in this way, perfect. Really like a great tool in the toolbox. But I think, and that's what we talked about before you become a mum, you're not looking for these words. You're not looking for these things, because what do we get told? Have the beautiful nursery, get the beautiful cot, decorate the room. Oh, what beautiful prints do you have on the wall? Me and my daughter never went into the cot. I ended up giving it to my friend who had just had a third baby. And I said, take it. I hope it gets used somewhere else. So I'm happy to pass that on, because we didn't use it. It became just a piece of decoration in my room. And this is a very real reality for a lot of people. Not to say like some kids will go in the cot, that's fine. Mine just never did. And there's so many shoulds being thrown at me, like what I should be doing. Oh, I must be a bad mum because my daughter cries a lot. My daughter is very vocal. I must be a bad mum because she's not sleeping well. I must be a bad mum and that's why she's doing these things. And it took me so long to flip that around and go, no, it's got nothing to do with me. She is who she is. And I am just doing the best I can with the support that I have at the time, with the information I have. I'm just doing my best. And I mean, we know this as well. Your kids get sent to you for a very real reason. Like, I do believe this. And I really love that you spoke about having that big gap, because my daughter's 3. So obviously, people are like, when are you having your next? And for me, I sometimes find it really hard to get my head around it, because I'm going to be thrown back in that. Am I going to be able to cope? Like, I know I have a better support network now. I know I've resourced myself better, but I know I know what it can be like.
That's
Look,
it.
I'm not oblivious to it anymore. I know. And I consider all of these things. So I find that tricky. So I love that you talked about a gap, because that is something I'm seriously thinking about. Like, am I supposed to have a bigger gap? Where do I sit with that? And very much just trying to get rid of the whole what you should be doing, because there are no rules here. Like, there are no rules that we have to follow. It can look different for every person.
And that was something that I like. Between having my kids, obviously 7 years had gone past. I was a lot older. I'd experienced a lot more life, but I did start working in childcare in that time. And that was, for me, the biggest thing that I learned, that every baby's different and it really doesn't matter what you do. Parents would have instructions of, feed them to sleep with a bottle, put them in the awake with a dummy, wrap them, don't wrap them, put them on their side, put them on their belly, like the nurse, like cuddle them, make sure they're asleep before you put them in, all this sort of stuff. And I just opened my eyes to, like, there's no right or wrong. Because that was in my head at that point. Like, I'm quite a black and white kind of person, like I don't know, a structure, routine. I like predictability. And so having a baby was like the opposite of all of that, And I talked myself into that I was going to have this baby that was going to be on this schedule and whatever. And no. And now that I know this child, I've known him, for 15 years, he was never going to be on the schedule. Like, that kid does not do it. So I had this book that I'd written in when we were sort of thinking about having another one, like all the things that I would do different. And it was like, don't be hard on yourself. Don't be hard on your baby. Like, sit and cuddle them for ages. Like, the books had said, no, you can't cuddle them. After so many weeks, they get used to it and then they'll want you all the time. And it was
so
like,
ridiculous, isn't it?
Oh my God. Like, and I think back on those times and I think, my God, like, I don't know if there's been long-term damage done to our relationship because of it. We'll never know this stuff. But you think, God, being told not to hold your child in case they might want you. It's like, that's life. People want each other. We want connection. We want people. And so I had this massive long list of things that I would do. And it wasn't necessarily all this practical stuff. It was how I would be kinder to myself and the expectations that I wouldn't put on myself. Like breastfeeding. I had to breastfeed my first child. And I went through hell because I had this idea in my head that you had to breastfeed your child exclusively. A society thing, And I remember times of just being in tears because he wouldn't latch properly. And my husband's like, oh, do you think I should go get some formula? And I was like, no, don't you dare get formula. I can do this, And I was sending myself insane. And the best thing that ever happened to me was that when my second baby was born, he was really tiny, really underweight, and he was in one of those little hot box things. I don't know what the correct term is. The
Is
incubator
it
box.
humidity crib? Doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
humidity
We
crib. There
know
you
what
go.
you
That
mean.
sounds better.
It's fine.
Hot box is great though. I love
Yeah,
that.
that's
Still
what we were
fact-
calling
it's
it.
still
in the hospital.
correct. It's fine.
Yeah, but they gave him formula to keep him alive till my milk came in, and it was
Mm.
like it was out of my hands, which was wonderful. It was just taken away from me that I had to put this pressure on myself. And I noticed actually, Jessie, if you want to talk about it or not, I'm not sure because I haven't asked you yet. But in that quote that I read, there was the next bit about doing it differently the second time. Yeah, can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I as I sort of said earlier, my mental health was atrocious after Finley was born, and I remember sort of sitting in my GP's office, and she was wonderful. She was so wonderful. I was sitting there with a Macca's coffee, and my mum was sitting next to me, holding Finley for me. And this beautiful GP was going through the questions, checking in on my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And before I could really say much, my mum, because we were living with her at the time, because we were renovating to sell, so my partner and I became parents under her roof.
Yep.
We brought Finley home from the hospital there. Like he grew up the first 2.5 years of his life there. And yeah, sort of before I could answer much, my mum, really reassuringly said, "Oh no, yeah, but Jess is fine. There's not a great deal of, pressure on her. I'm doing X, Y, Z." So obviously at that point I was just like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine." But I wasn't fine.
Yeah.
I'd had a very traumatic birth, and I think because of that, I had this fierce love for this little boy, my little world changer. His name is Scottish and it means fair warrior. And I think the way he entered the world definitely reinforced that was the correct name for him.
Mm-hmm.
I had this fierce love for him, this protective mama bear, but I was really struggling to enjoy the day to day of, the changing bums and things and I could follow a structure, but just sort of feeling, fulfilled, it just wasn't sort of there for me at first.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very, very disconnected, very, very disconnected. And like I said, I was very, very mentally unwell. And it wasn't, as I said earlier, it wasn't until I started to actually focus on my needs again. I remember the particular moment, Finley was maybe 8 months old. And I said to my mum, "Can I go to a cafe?" And so she had him. And I went to this cafe. I sat down with my laptop. I called ahead of time. I was like, "Can I book a table with a PowerPoint?" Because my Veo is about 20 years old. So I've got a new one now. It's a new laptop now.
Yeah.
But my Veo, I could not use it without being plugged in. So I called ahead of time, "Can I please have a table?" Anyway, so booked me in, had my name. I sat there. And I just wrote. I wrote and wrote and wrote for about 2 hours. And when I got back in the car, just how sparkly I felt. I was absolutely on top of the world that I'd got to sit and do something that I really enjoyed. And it was, I think I reviewed a Jay Shetty podcast, and it was just, trying to reflect on how it was relevant for my life, and then just wrote a few other bits and pieces, and it just was just absolutely phenomenal. But I think as well, I did want to sort of come across as someone who had it all together as well. I very much, because my mental health, isolated myself from friends and extended family. We really didn't get out of the house very much at all.
Yeah.
So fast forward that few years when I'd really started to get to know more about who I was as a mum and what brought me joy. That was when, leading into Esther, I really decided, I really knew I needed to make sure that I had that creative practice integrated, and that I had spoken to people around me about what that could look like, just to really contribute to making sure I stayed mentally well, regardless of what the birth was, like that I was, very sort of maintained that wellness afterwards. And I mean, Esther's birth was awesome. I felt incredibly powerful like after her birth.
Yeah.
And I can't downplay how much that additionally contributed to my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just not even remotely the same as the first one. But I think another really important thing was that Mitch and I, so we were living in our new house that he actually built, which was wonderful. So our kids get to say, Daddy built this house. So that's so lovely. But we let go of the things. So, washing would pile up, but hey, they were clean. It was fine. They didn't need to go away. Maybe the dishwasher didn't go on. Toys stayed out. I let go of what we were talking before about, perfectly curated Instagram feeds. I let go of that. I was like, that's not me. That's not going to happen. Because we sort of stayed in our bubble a little bit, but we had meals already in the freezer ready to go. And, I'd made sure that Finley was still go out doing fun things with family a few days a week. So I just had that time with Esther. And so I really intentionally looked at what kept me mentally well, and then incorporated that as best I could. But it didn't mean that I didn't have down moments and down days. And that's what I made sure I shared as well on my Instagram, because I didn't want it to be this highlight reel of, yes, I'm fine all the time.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be a much more, vulnerable and real, I guess, just more real of that experience, that yes, we will have some incredible moments, but there will also be some challenging points as well. So I think those are probably the key things I did differently. But we talk about laughter and being silly, and that is something that it's incredibly important to me to incorporate fun into anything that I do. And going back to Dr. Sophie Brock, remember what I did, what sort of led me to her is that a friend, just before her membership, she had a course, and I think it was with Liberate. And part of Liberate was you had to write your motherhood manifesto. And for me, the top thing I wrote, and I still have it, was around integrating fun and silliness into my day and my parenting. So that's been something, I guess, leading into it, I wouldn't have thought about. But as Mary said, these little things that continue to happen and snowball. So I guess that's in a snapshot, in a really brief way, things I did a bit differently.
No, that's awesome. And I love that fun, because I feel like you can get bogged down so much in the day-to-day and the grind, and you can actually forget, to be lighthearted and enjoy yourself. And I think that also helps your relationship too with your partner, if you can actually, I don't know, then you're not as grumpy, I suppose, and you can have that, that fun that you would have had before you had the kids, I guess. You're reminded of that.
Well, we actually, the other week, my mum had them, both of ours, for the full day, which had not happened outside of, having to work. And I said to Mitch, we can look at each other and talk to each other. And it was so funny. We watched movies, we went and had lunch and wine. And then we came back and watched more movies.
That is awesome.
So it was wonderful, because we can sometimes forget in the busyness and the depletion sometimes of it to nurture those relationships.
Oh, absolutely.
I've done it many times, so it was lovely to just go, oh yes, hello.
It's easy to take each other for granted, that's for sure. Now, Mary, I want to come back to something you've said a couple of times, and I've got to jump on it now, about mum guilt. How do you feel about it now after, you shared your experience about not feeling like you could have a shower and that sort of stuff? What are your thoughts on it in these days?
Oh, entirely different. So, I mean, I still feel it occasionally sometimes. I think it's inevitable that we'll feel it to some extent. Just the same way I believe dads would feel guilty about something as well, or just the normal sort of human experience of feeling guilt. But in terms of actually being a mum and taking that time for myself, no. So I guess it's twofold. I've undone a lot of that conditioning around what I'm allowed to do or whatever, and what would make me feel good. And I've also communicated to hubby very explicitly, and I mean like very explicitly. Old Mary would have been that person that sort of didn't communicate it properly and then kind of let it fester in the background and then went quiet or eventually flew off the handle, and he would have no idea what I was upset about or what was going on.
Yeah.
And so I guess the teaching skills come in of like very explicit and direct of, when you come home sometimes and I'm fed up and I've had a day, I'm going to take half an hour.
Yeah.
And I don't want to feel guilty about it. I don't want to feel bad about it. I just need you to take her and just do what you need to do. And I will reappear when I feel like I'm more than ready.
Yeah.
And no, I don't feel guilty about that at all. Because I'm with my daughter still sort of 24/7, she's not in any type of care. Again, as you can hear, she's back again with her animals and just wanting to make an appearance in our podcast.
I love
just
it.
give me a sec, bub. Because I am with her all the time, I think it goes back to, those little moments that I can get and finding things we both enjoy doing, right? Like I love going up to the lookout around my area just because, I don't know, it's peaceful and I enjoy it. And she loves it. She just kind of flutters around, looks at the birds and does things. So I make it a priority to go, we can go up to the lookout and we can spend time together there.
Yeah.
And I don't need to feel guilty about, everybody's getting their needs met, right?
Yeah.
So, I think a lot about how we can create win-win situations as well. It's not always going to be the case, of course. I go to many a library dance class and art class and play groups and all those wonderful things, gymnastics today actually. But I kind of make it a priority to go, I can talk to mums there and I can still make it an enjoyable experience for me as well. So, I don't feel as guilty. I say no a lot more.
Yeah, right.
My family lives in Sydney, so sometimes hubby will want to go see in-laws. I'm like, I'm actually not going to come today. You take her though. You take her and you go and have a great time, and I don't have to feel bad about that.
Yeah.
I don't need to be everywhere all the time because my rest matters.
Yeah.
I explained it to a friend the other day as I know what it feels like to have a rattling nervous system constantly. So when it's rattling, and once you recognize how to calm that and feel at peace, you can't go back. I accept nothing less, essentially. So the guilt kind of dissolved with that over time.
Yeah.
Essentially kind of dissolved, I think, on its own. Because I realized I was a better mum, a better wife, a better person when I was taking care of those things. Yeah. And so why should I feel guilty about that? That's a positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see the hand.
Sorry,
No, it's fine.
It's wonderful.
So funny. I love it.
I know. Look, even trying to do a podcast with a 3-year-old would have brought me incredible anxiety a year ago. But now I kind of we roll with the punches here.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
and
it,
you are
isn't it?
such my role model, Mary, with that. I mean, so many times with us working together, because I guess you've got that still within me and it's dissolving, but that sort of people pleasing, that validation, and wanting to move things quickly.
Yeah.
Mary has been so wonderful at just helping me take a breath.
Yeah.
And not move faster than we need to, and just what, it's fine, that doesn't need to be done today. And so even though I understand some of that, the theory, understand it theoretically, about, how to calm our nervous system, and I'm relatively okay with it. I still sometimes need that prompt of, hey, how about we just take a breath and let's just push this back.
But I will say on the flip side, Jessie goes fast and I go slower, as in not fast in a bad way, but we meet beautifully in the middle. So I actually need her to give me a bit of a kick sometimes.
It's
been very complimentary, hasn't it? Because Mary will be like, oh, but look, how about we consider XYZ? And that's been a very crucial element to, maybe the story or what we're doing. But if I'd wanted to speed on past that, it wouldn't have been addressed in a way that gave it the most kind of meaning and impact.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
So, we've needed each other. And I mean, there's been some times too when, we've wanted to consider something and I've said, oh, no, let's go. And then we have. But we've needed both to be able to bring this project to where it is. So we perfectly complement each other.
It sounds amazing. Isn't it funny how you just meet people in your life like that? Like just the randomness of everything that's had to happen to get you to the point where you're at. It's just, I love stuff like that.
Yes, so absolutely.
Good.
It is. And I mean, within straight away, Mary and Mitch were just, giggling with each other, and because he's very cheeky and Mary is totally on board that train. So, they were bouncing off each other and our kids were playing wonderfully, but because we have similar parenting values, we could perfectly support them in whatever they were feeling in any moment. So it was easy for that reason as well, which is sometimes half the battle with.
Yeah, that is so true. Your parenting styles are a bit conflicting. It can be a bit tricky.
It can. And again, everyone's doing the best they can. So
yeah, absolutely.
I absolutely acknowledge that. But it was, so it was very easeful. But it was a random series of events.
Yeah. No, love it. I just love it. So where are you at? What point are you at with the book at the moment?
Oh, do you want to talk about that, Mary?
I'm being doctor at the same time because I'm a multitasking mum. I'm a vet. I'm helping some animals here whilst I do this interview. Yes, I can do it all. So basically we have our illustrator over in the US who is very hard on working on our storyboard. We've sort of finalized that essentially, and she's got sketches. So it's so interesting getting sent the updates and you realize, she's done a few more pages and the words that we've said and the description we've given her is actually coming to life now, it's real. So we're still hoping for an end of June release, and I think we're on track with that, but also open to the fact if it pushes out to July, we're okay with that as well. But it's just a lot of back and forth with the illustrator now. So the thing is, I sometimes feel sorry for our illustrator because she's incredibly patient and we throw a lot at her. We really do. Traditionally, if you were to, because we're self-publishing, if you were to actually get it published, you would send a manuscript. They would essentially choose an illustrator. Your book would appear illustrated. But we have very big ideas of what could be on each page. We just can't actually bring it to life ourselves. So trying to get her to kind of understand that has been like a journey. And it's hard when you've got something in your head and you're trying to really explain it, but she's doing beautifully with that. So we're I feel like we're on track. She's kind of really pushing along now. We're just sort of thinking about what the front cover should be. We're going back and forth, but that's starting to make more sense. And then we had run our Kickstarter campaign back in November to December of last year and raised $8,000 for our book to be published. So very interesting. So we kind of ran this thinking, we'll get some support. Like we know we've got some people out there that want to see this book come to life. But then we got an incredible amount of support and managed to fund it through that. So there's people with some pre-orders and things like that. And we just keep sort of slowly pushing the message. But Jessie does work as well. I've got Missy. We do it in the pockets of time.
Yeah.
Like we could be doing more maybe, but I don't know. We're just sort of doing it at our own pace, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's all sort of making sense, like Jessie said. Like if we had persevered and tried to get this book out like already or even last year or something, it might not have had the depth and the layers to it as it has. And so we're just sort of doing our thing, and I'm excited to hold it in my hands. There's still a big part of me that thinks this is not real.
No, it's real. It's real and it's happening.
I know. I see the storyboard and I think, that's us. Like this isn't somebody else's book. We are doing this.
We do.
But I need to hold it first.
But there's been so many beautiful moments too, because Mary and I have spoken so much. We will be so excited to hold it, but we have had so much fun doing basically every step of the process, you know, from coming up with the manuscript to starting to share online to Sparkletober to putting together a Kickstarter, which is a feat in itself, and then to having that actually be successful. I think we'll be 1 or 2 days out from the deadline. And we were basically refreshed. You know, I was at home for the day doing, you know, parenting, but I was like refreshing it. And this donation come in that was the exact amount we needed to kick it over. And I was like, grab the phone, call Mary. And she said she's looking at it going, he must have funded it. Anyway, it was
that in itself. I mean, you got to celebrate, don't you? Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that you guys, you're not pushing it. Like it's a thing that happens as a, you know, what's the word? In conjunction with your life. Like it fits into your life. So then hopefully it doesn't cause, you know, extra stress or, you know, because we've all got that already. So, you know, it's just it's enjoyable and, you know, I keep saying, you know, I've got to cut that out. But
oh no, I say all the time. Don't worry about it.
But it's a thing that you guys can experience and enjoy and look back on, that the process was enjoyable, you know.
And that for me, it's very important. It's not just the outcome that I need to be, you know, in love with. It's the process of getting to that outcome. The act in itself has to bring me joy for it really to be worth it at the other end. So because I guess, you know, for me it's you know, being able to access our creativity, you know, it's a stress relief. But so I think though too, it doesn't always owe us anything, you know. In this moment it's bringing me joy. It doesn't necessarily have to have that tangible outcome. It's so interesting to think how many hours we would have spent on it, and I would do it again. I would do it again.
My husband actually said that yesterday. He goes, how many hours do you think you've spent? I said, well, I don't know. I mean, I was doing it with a toddler tucked under my arm. You know, I'm a night owl. Jessie's an early riser, so I would be sending stuff in a Canva document. She'd get it at 5 a.m. and reply, and then sort of that's how we worked it. But he asked that, and he made this joke once of, oh, you know, you're going to be famous with this book. I said, that is not my intention. Oh, sorry, guys. I have no intention of being. I don't want to be famous. In fact, if I just have one mum that reads it and goes,
that's right,
it made me feel a little bit better, and it reminded me that, you know, I do matter now. Like I do matter. I can talk into my sparkle, and I can prioritize that. Like I'm winning. You know, that's not. And I know it sounds so cliche to say it that way, but that genuinely is how we're thinking about it. Like we're not trying to get anything from it. It's not. It's just our expression wrapped up in a picture book for others to enjoy, and that's it. It's that simple.
Our legacy, like for me to hand, Finley doesn't really care now too much, but one day I'm sure both of them will know more. And I mean, for me to just be able to, you know, give that to my children, what legacy, you know. And so exactly what Mary said, you know, for just even if one mum reads it and resonates with it and maybe feels empowered to make some changes in her life or ask for what she wants or needs. And then for our children to go, Mummy made this. You know, they will know us. See, coming back to what I was saying before, my children will know me.
Absolutely. Yes. I love it. I love it. It's so exciting. Good on you, girls. I'm really excited for you. So where's the best place for people to follow along? And you mentioned about pre-orders. Can people pre-order, or was that just on the Kickstarter?
They will.
Mhm.
We've just got to sort that out.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, we're in the process of making sure that people can do that ahead of time.
Mhm.
But we are having the most fun over on our Instagram, aren't we, Mary, at the moment?
Mhm.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's at the mum who found her sparkle. So it's just our joint one. We do things on our separate ones and often post to there as well.
Mhm.
And we pop up a lot sometimes, although we might disappear for a little while, then we pop up again. This is how we're rolling with it. But yeah, the mum who found her sparkle is where you'll find everything book related, essentially.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Excellent. I'll put a hyperlink in the show notes so people can click along and follow the journey. Oh, it's been so lovely to have you both on today. Thank you so much.
Nice.
And
Thanks for being so
really lovely
patient
chat.
with me,
Yeah.
muting and unmuting every few
No,
seconds.
it's been wonderful. No, it's been great, and all the best with it. And I really hope it's I don't know, that feeling when you do get it in your hands. It's like this amazing moment for you both. I think, wonderful. And I'll definitely be getting a copy myself. So I'm looking forward to adding it to my collection of books that I've spoken to people on the podcast. It's pretty cool.
You would have a wonderful collection of things based on all the beautiful conversations you've had.
A lot of lovely books. I'm very, very fortunate, actually. This has been a sort of an side of, like, an unexpected side of talking to lots of people is I've just collected lots of amazing books. It's really awesome.
How wonderful.
So
that sounds like a dream, actually.
So yes, I'll be looking forward to add your book to it and at some point in the very near future. Thanks again. Thanks for your company today. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd love you to consider leaving us a review, following or subscribing to the podcast, or even sharing it with a friend you think might be interested. The music you heard featured on today's episode was from Alemjo, which is my new age ambient music trio comprised of myself, my sister Emma Anderson and her husband John. If you'd like to hear more, you can find a link to us in the show notes. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the podcast, please get in touch with us via the link in the show notes. I'll catch you again next week for another chat with an artistic mum.